We left off last video discussing the new app lifecycle in iOS 14. In this video, we're going to start getting ready to build the list screen that you see here, and that is going to be a network call. We're going to get all this appetizer information via a server so we can populate that. The first thing we need to do, though, is start building our model and building our appetizer object. And looking at this screen, you can start to see, right? It's going to have an image or an image URL. It's going to have a name, a price. If we pull up the detail screen, you can see there's more information, like a little description, some nutrition information, right? So our appetizer object has a lot of properties on it. And to know what properties we need to include on that, we need to look at the JSON that we're going to get back from the server. So to do that, you'll notice a link in the description to this video. There's going to be a link to our JSON. So click that link and open it up in Safari. So I'm going to pull up Safari. I'm going to Command V because I already had it copy and pasted. Here's our JSON. Real quick, if yours doesn't look like that, right? If it looks more, I'm going to click this little monkey in the upper right. If it looks more like this, a jumbled mess, you should probably install some Safari extensions or a Chrome extension, right? If I go to Safari, Safari extensions, this will pull up the App Store. Just type in JSON viewer or something like that. There's a bunch of them out there. I got this JSON Peep. That's the one I'm using. There's other paid ones, that do more. Totally up to you what you want to get, but I highly recommend doing that because, as an iOS developer, you're going to be looking at a lot of JSON. It's nice if it is formatted nicely. All right, so back to Safari. You can see, right, we have a request, which is an array, and then here are our appetizer objects, right? We have a name, Asian flank steak, description, protein, an ID, calories, price, carbs, and then the image URL. So this is how we're going to structure our model based on looking at this JSON. And here's the downside about this one that I got from Safari. Like, I can't manipulate the structure of this. So I'm going to go to Chrome here. And I'm showing you both ways, like intentionally. If you're a Safari user or Chrome user, you can do this. So again, I'm going to paste the URL in there. And the Chrome extension I use is called Pretty JSON. Again, they're all free. But the one in Chrome I like because I can see these little down arrows, right? Like, I can manipulate the structure so I can get a better visualization of it. Because oftentimes JSON can be like heavily nested and hard to figure out what's going on. So here I can see we get a request that has an array of items. That array of items is our array, like I'm minimizing each one here, right? Is our array of appetizer items. So that gives you a sense of how the JSON is structured. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Right now I want to focus on just the appetizer itself. But a quick note about showing you the JSON like this, there's a wide variety of how well documented an API can be. Sometimes the API is beautifully documented. You don't have to dig into the JSON. The documentation will show you, hey, description is a string, price is a double, very well documented. However, that's not always the case. It's very often that, sometimes the API is not well documented and you have to dig into the JSON to figure out for yourself. So that's why I wanted to show you this. Well, that's one reason. Another reason, as you can see by this URL up here, is one thing I'm starting to do for my courses is build out my own backend. So I can start building my own APIs and endpoints, which gives me more flexibility to be more creative in the types of sample apps I can make. You're seeing the very, very first version of it right now. But my idea is that in future courses, building out my own backend gives me a lot more flexibility in what I can build. Because to be honest with you, my previous courses, I had to find an API that was like open and free, didn't deal with like OAuth or API keys, because oftentimes that was outside the scope of the course. So I was really limited in like what types of apps I can build because I was limited to, what API was free that also offered up, the stuff that I needed in the format that I needed, right? So building my own backend, hopefully I can do better stuff. I just wanted to talk about that real quick to give you the context on like why this is kind of a little hacky, a little janky. But I didn't think it was bad to include in the course because oftentimes when dealing with JSON and APIs, it may not be well documented. So knowing how to do this is a good skill. Okay, again, using this structure, let's build our appetizer object. So in Xcode, in appetizers, do Command N for new Swift file, not Swift UI view, hit next. And this is going to be called appetizer. So for now, we can keep a foundation. I'll do struct appetizer. And the first, let's see, these are going to be lets, not vars, because we're not changing these, right? We're just reading the data. We're not like, changing the name of something and sending it back up to the server. So these can be lets. So let's just kind of start logically here. I'm going to go back to Chrome. This order doesn't necessarily have to be the order you do it in. Again, I like to be logical. So I look at this. I think ID should probably go at the top. I'm thinking like ID, name, description, price, image URL, and then like, nutritional data. You can put them in whatever order you want, but I like to put them in that kind of logical order. So let's do let ID, and that's going to be an int. Let name, that is going to be a string. what did I say? What was the next one? Yeah, description, price, image URL. Let description, that's going to be a string. Price is going to be a double. Whoops, I gotta say let price. And then let image URL is going to be a string. One thing to keep in mind here, this is a very, very common mistake. You see how I made URL all caps here? A lot of people will do URL. And when using Codable, which we're going to use, more on that in a second, it needs to match like exactly with what we have coming from the API, right? So if this image URL, if this URL wasn't all caps, but you made it all caps, things are gonna break. So be very careful to name your properties exactly what's in the JSON if you're going to use Codable, which is what we are going to use to parse the JSON. Now there is a thing called like coding keys that you can customize all that. Beyond the scope of this course, we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Just name your properties the same as you see here. So you might even want to copy and paste. That could be a safe way to do it. We've already gone too far. We haven't done that yet. So image URL, the URL is all caps. Trust me, that gets a lot of people. Okay, so now we just need the nutritional information. So let calories, and that is going to be a int. You know what, I'm just gonna be safe. Let's do this. Let's practice what we preach here. Calories, because again, if you misspell it, it's gonna be off. Okay, so let calories equals int, that's good. Protein, copy, paste, int. Let, what is this, carbs, and paste, and int. Okay, so now we have, let's not make sure we didn't forget one, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, cool. Just to double check, make sure we have everything. We have the basis of our model object for the appetizer ready to go. Now I talked about Codable, how that's how we're going to parse our JSON. That was new in like Swift 4, so it's been out for a couple years now. I'm not going to give a Codable lesson. If you don't know that, I'll link to some helpful resources. Hopefully you've been doing that by now. But I will keep it at a high level and describe what's going on. It just won't be super in depth. So you may be used to conforming to Codable like this, right? Just Codable. Well, if we click into Codable, little lesson here, all Codable is a type alias for conforming to both decodable and encodable. First of all, we just need to use decodable, right? There's no need for us to encode data. So real quick, what this does is decodable, when we get JSON from the server, it will decode that into our appetizer object, right? So when we just retrieve data and receiving, we just need to decode it. We don't need to encode it. When you would need to encode your data is like, say we were downloading the appetizers, we were manipulating them. Like I said, maybe we were changing the name, changing the price, and then sending them back up to the server. So before you send it back up to the server, that's when you need encodable, right? We're not doing any of that, so there's no reason to conform to encodable. It's just unnecessary. So we're only going to conform to decodable because again, we're just decoding the data from the server. And like I said, in order for decodable to work, your structure has to be exactly what's expected from the server. And if we go back to our JSON here, remember the structure, right? And just at a high level, we have request and then an array, right? The JSON is just a dictionary, key value pairs. So it's like one layer of nesting going on here. So we can't just decode our response from the server into an appetizer. We have to decode it into that request that has an array of appetizers. So below this, let's create a response object to handle that. That way Codable or decodable works smoothly. So I'm going to create another struct right below here. It's kind of like a helper struct, if you will. We'll call it appetizer response. And oftentimes you have to do this if your JSON's like really, really nested here. But just like what we do, we have let request, and then that is an array of appetizer, right? That is all what we built here is this, right? So this object right here is our appetizer response. It has a property of a request, and that request is an array of appetizers. So we're just mirroring the structure of the JSON. So that's why we have this appetizer response with the variable array of appetizers. Okay, so now that we have that response and that is getting ready to accept our network call and we have our appetizer, the last thing I want to do is create just a little bit of mock data for when we build our list view in the next video. It's nice to have like a mock appetizer to work with since we're not going to have our network call implemented yet. So we can structure our UI using the mock data. So we're going to build that. And we've done this before in an app, but I usually have this. Usually once the app is done being developed, I delete this stuff, it goes away. But usually during development, it's nice to have this mock data type stuff here. So mock data, first thing we're going to have is a static let sample appetizer, and that's going to equal an appetizer. We're going to initialize a new one here. Again, it's initialized based off of, the properties we just had here. So ID, and I'm just going to make stuff up here because this doesn't matter, right? This is just to populate our UI to make sure things are looking good. So the name, we can say test appetizer. Description, this is the description for my appetizer. It's yummy. And again, we'll start lining up our parameters like this. We'll go ahead and do this right now because it's annoying. Okay, so the price, we can say this is $9.99. Image URL, I'm just gonna leave blank right now because we're not downloading images yet. That's fine. We're gonna use like a placeholder image as well. Calories, cool, 99. Protein, 99. You can put whatever numbers in here you want. Again, this is just to get the structure of our UI looking good. So oftentimes in your sample data, it's nice to test extremes, right? Like if you wanted to test a really long appetizer name, you can test this here. So that's our sample appetizer that we're going to use. And then in the next video, we're going to need an array of appetizers to populate our list, right? Remember, if you have a list, you need an array of something to populate it. So we're going to do static let appetizers equal, and then I'm just going to do sample. Again, this is just dummy data. Just like give me 4 sample appetizers. And the last thing we're going to set up in our mock data is we need a test image. So if you open up your XC assets, right now we just have our colors here, but we're going to add an image to that. And I've attached the image to the video in the description. You'll see an image down there, the Asian flank steak image. So I'm going to grab the Asian flank steak JPEG, drop it into my images, and we're good to go. Remember, we're going to be downloading the images from the server. This is just a test one to structure our UI. So back to our appetizer object. Like I said, we created our object based on the JSON that we are getting back from the server. We created our response object to handle the structure of the JSON, and this is necessary when we're using Codable. If you're manually parsing the JSON, you don't have to do this. You can dig through the JSON manually, but we are using Codable, so we're going to do that. And then we set up our mock data with the sample appetizer and just a basic little array just to help us build the list in the next video.